In the year 1692, in the quiet, isolated village of Salem, Massachusetts, a shadow began to fall. Life was hard, ruled by strict faith and the unforgiving New England wilderness. Here, among the misty forests and simple wooden houses, a fear began to spread like wildfire. It was a fear of the dark woods, a fear of the devil, a fear of the unknown. But soon it would become a fear of something far more terrifying, a fear of their very own neighbors. In a world lit only by candles and faith, the line between reality and superstition was thin. The people of Salem believed the devil was real, a constant threat walking among them, looking for weaknesses, for souls to corrupt. They saw his work in failed crops, in sudden illness, and in the harshness of their daily lives. This deep-seated belief set the stage for a tragedy that would stain the pages of American history forever. The community, already on edge, was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. They could never have imagined that the spark would come from the most innocent among them, the children. This is the story of how fear, faith, and madness collided, turning a small village into a place of nightmares. It began quietly in the cold winter months within the home of the village minister, Reverend Samuel Parris. His young daughter, Betty, and his niece, Abigail Williams, started to behave strangely. They would hide under furniture, make odd sounds, and contort their bodies into unnatural positions. Soon, other girls in the village began to show the same terrifying symptoms. They screamed as if in agony, trembled uncontrollably, and spoke in words that made no sense. Doctors were called, but they were baffled. With no physical explanation for the girls' torment, they could only suggest one possibility: the supernatural. The word witchcraft was whispered, and the whisper quickly grew into a roar. Under pressure from the concerned and frightened adults, the afflicted girls began to name names. They claimed they were being tormented by specters, the invisible spirits of certain people in the village. The first to be accused were three women who lived on the margins of society: Tituba, the Parris family's enslaved servant from the Caribbean; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly, impoverished woman who rarely attended church. These accusations lit the fuse of hysteria. The idea that witches were secretly living among them, sent by the devil to destroy their godly community, took hold of Salem's collective imagination. The girls, once just children, were now seen as victims and prophets, their strange fits accepted as proof of a satanic attack. What started as a mysterious illness in a single household was about to explode into a full-blown witch hunt, and no one would be safe from the storm of accusations that was about to break. The accusations spread like a plague. What began with three outcast women soon grew to include dozens more. Anyone could be next. A long-standing argument with a neighbor, a strange birthmark, or simply not showing enough grief at a funeral could be twisted into evidence of witchcraft. Sarah Good, one of the first accused, was a poor woman who often begged door to door. Her grumpy demeanor and muttered curses when turned away were now remembered as a witch's hex. Sarah Osborne was entangled in a dispute over her late husband's estate, making her unpopular. And Tituba, a woman from a different culture, was an easy target for suspicion. Under intense questioning, and likely coercion, Tituba confessed. She told the magistrates fantastic stories of a black dog, a red cat, and a tall, dark man who asked her to sign the devil's book. She claimed there were other witches in Salem working alongside her. Her confession was a turning point. It seemed to confirm everyone's worst fears. There was a conspiracy of witches threatening to tear Salem apart. This sent a wave of panic through the community. Fingers began to point not just at the poor and powerless, but at respected members of the church, at farmers, at mothers, at anyone who might have an enemy. A simple word, a whispered rumor, was now enough to ruin a reputation, destroy a family, and ultimately end a life. The jails began to fill with the accused, each one waiting in terror for their day in court. The trials began in the spring of 1692, but these were not trials of reason or justice. The courtroom was a theater of chaos, ruled by hysteria. The magistrates, stern men in black robes, listened intently as the afflicted girls put on a horrifying show. Whenever an accused person entered the room, the girls would scream, convulse, and claim that the defendant's specter was pinching, biting, and choking them. This spectral evidence, the testimony of a ghost that only the victim could see, was treated as undeniable fact. The accused stood alone, with no lawyers to defend them. They were presumed guilty from the start. They were asked leading questions like, "Have you not seen the devil?" And "Why do you hurt these children?" If they denied the charges, the girls' fits would grow more intense, seemingly proving their guilt. If they confessed, they were spared execution but were forced to name other witches, feeding the fire and condemning more innocent people. Many of the accused, like the respected and pious Rebecca Nurse, maintained their innocence to the very end. But in a court that accepted dreams and visions as evidence, their pleas were useless. Justice had given way to fear. The scales were tipped, not by facts, but by the cries of terrified girls and the blind faith of powerful men. For those on trial, the courtroom offered no hope of escape, only a path to the gallows. The summer of 1692 was a season of death. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop, a tavern owner with a reputation for being outspoken, became the first person to be executed for witchcraft. She was hanged on Gallows Hill, a barren rise of land overlooking the town. Her death was not the end, but the beginning. Throughout the summer, more followed. Sarah Good, still protesting her innocence, was hanged. The well-respected minister George Burroughs, who recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly on the gallows, something a witch was supposedly unable to do, was executed anyway. The crowd wavered for a moment, but the spell of fear was too strong to break. In total, 19 men and women were hanged. Another man, the elderly Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones after he refused to enter a plea, a brutal and defiant end. As the executions continued under dark, stormy skies, silent crowds gathered to watch. Some surely felt a grim satisfaction, believing their community was being purified. But others must have looked on in horror, their hearts filled with doubt and dread. 20 people were dead, their lives sacrificed to a madness that had consumed an entire community. They were innocent people, lost not to witchcraft, but to panic, prejudice, and blind belief. The hangings were the brutal climax of Salem's hysteria, a tragic testament to the destructive power of fear. As autumn arrived and the leaves began to fall, the fever of the witch hunt finally started to break. Doubts that had been whispered were now being spoken aloud. Influential leaders, including Governor William Phips, began to question the reliance on spectral evidence. The afflicted girls were starting to accuse people of high standing, including the governor's own wife, which made the authorities uneasy. The court was finally dissolved in October. The remaining prisoners were eventually released. The nightmare was over. In the years that followed, a heavy silence fell over Salem. The fields were tended, the houses were repaired, but the community was forever changed, haunted by what they had done. Many of the key figures in the trials, including Judge Samuel Sewell and some of the jurors, publicly apologized and admitted their terrible mistake. In 1697, the colony held a day of fasting and prayer to atone for the tragedy. The Salem Witch Trials became a dark chapter in the nation's memory, a powerful and enduring warning of what can happen when reason is lost and a community turns on itself. Today, modern-day Salem remembers its past not with shame, but as a lesson. Museums, memorials, and candlelight vigils honor the victims, ensuring that their stories are never forgotten. The story of Salem is about more than just witches and trials. It's a timeless human story about how easily fear can poison a community, how prejudice can blind us to the truth, and how dangerous it is to turn on one another in times of uncertainty. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a stark reminder from history, a lesson written in blood about the need for reason, tolerance, and justice. It's a story from the past that echoes powerfully in our world today, urging us to choose understanding over suspicion and unity over division. In Salem, fear became the true witch, and that is a lesson we must never forget.